Come back in the last couple of days, we've been talking about, dare I say, the ongoing saga, the days of our lives when it comes to college sports, specifically college basketball, college football. Where does this thing go? House settlements. Now we've got agreements trying to be forced down people's throats with the Power Four conferences. It can be a lot to keep track of, and our next guest has done a great job. She writes for frontofficesports.com. You can find her on Twitter or X at Cristovich, and you can call her, well, I guess, Amanda Christovich. Amanda, thanks for taking a couple minutes for us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Now, you talked about, you've written several pieces on this, and you talked about in your last one here that came out in just maybe a week ago about this kind of lobbying campaign that the NCAA and the Power Five have put forth, this $15 million lobbying campaign. Kind of talk to me about where you think the purpose of this is going, because to me, when I look at this just seems like the NCAA is tired of getting their ass kicked in court and is now just throwing it to the Power Four. And the Power Four is saying, we know we're going to get our ass kicked in court unless someone from the government gives us an exemption. So this just kind of feels like a Hail Mary desperate grasp on the part of the Power Four to be allowed to continue to control something the courts have told them that they're not allowed to. Am I completely off basis on this?
Not at all, not at all. I think that that lobbying campaign has actually been going on since like 2019, if I remember correctly, and it's definitely kicked into a really high gear, at least on the NCAA's part, since January when the Republicans took control of both houses of Congress as well as the White House. So that isn't necessarily new, but, and in addition to that, what also isn't new is, as you said, this idea that the NCAA is losing in court over and over and over again on attempts to restrict athlete compensation and attempts to regulate college sports from, everything from like eligibility to the transfer portal because of antitrust laws, and the fact that in order to have rules like you would in the NFL, for example, what makes that legal is a collective bargaining agreement. And college athletics just doesn't have that, right? So, how that connects to the House settlement is that, the House settlement around this time last year, this idea of revenue sharing, this idea of, giving schools the ability to pay players, but then also putting a cap on that revenue sharing, which is a de facto salary cap, according to a lot of people, and then, other restrictions that we could get into, you still need either collective bargaining or a federal law that says that, you have special protection to do this. And so the NCAA is not really going to be in charge of this anymore. It's going to be kicked to the power conferences, just as you said. You're totally right. The problem is the same problem they've been having for over a decade. The solution that they're asking for is federal intervention, which they haven't been able to get and still don't seem to be getting right now. Congress is a little busy. So I think that's kind of where we're at. And even though the power conferences are trying to get the schools to agree not to sue them, in the background, they are still in Congress, because they know that even if they get this House settlement approved, the enforcement of it is going to be very difficult if they don't have a federal law to back it up, because they refuse to do the one thing that makes these restrictions legal, which is collectively bargain. And I apologize because that was a very long answer to a short question.
No, I thought it was a very good answer. So what is it about the collective bargaining aspect of this that is so terrifying? Because to me, and my partner, it feels like this is where eventually this has to get to. So what is it about this that seemingly the Power Four and the NCAA, this is like this is the nuclear option. This is the end all to be all, avoided at all cost.
Well, because in order to collectively bargain in this country, you have to be deemed an employee. And the whole concept of the NCAA's business model of amateurism is that the players are not employees. And even though the NCAA is now admitting that players should be paid, they're trying to argue that these payments are not pay for play. That's what the NIL clearinghouse, if you've heard about that, is about. And, these revenue sharing agreements technically aren't supposed to be salaries. So, there's this huge boogeyman that the NCAA has been talking about, which is athlete employment status. And they argue that, all of the Olympic sports, there will be no funding. If you have to pay the football and basketball players, where are we going to get the money for Olympic sports? They argue that, their entire business model would collapse because the athletes would be subject to, or, really they would deserve more benefits and more rights and more recourse, right? Like any workers' compensation, any law that we have in this country, they would get that. And the NCAA, they've been fighting that in court for decades. So even though collective bargaining is the solution that literally every pro league in this country uses, they don't want to do it because they don't want to call the athletes employees.
We're talking to Amanda Christovich, frontofficesports.com. So I do enjoy the fact that what the NCAA and now the Power Four conferences are saying is we have an illegal model that has been deemed illegal basically by every court in the land, but we want to continue the illegal model because having the illegal model lets us have some stuff that we think is pretty cool, like swimming and diving in lacrosse. Like that seems that, like, I'm not kidding. That feels to like the only argument they have is, well, everyone really likes this stuff over here, so let's allow us to keep breaking laws so that we can give you this ancillary stuff that some people think is important.
100%. That is the most that is exactly what is happening here. And not only do they want to continue breaking the laws, they literally are asking Congress to write them different laws than any other industry in the United States has to abide by. That is exactly what is happening here. I could not have said it better myself. It's what I'm screaming from the mountaintops every time I try to talk to anyone about this, right? Because everybody says, well, should the athletes be employees and should the NCAA be able to control the transfer portal and NIL? The question isn't that's the wrong question, right? The question isn't should they? The question is legally, are they allowed to? And the answer is no. And if you don't like that, you either have to write new laws or go to a different country.
And yet we're the only country in the world that has anything like this. There's not another country on the planet that has any sort of academic system that's tied into their sports.
Not at all. Yeah. I mean, not at all. There are some where, there's fledgling, I believe in Australia, there are some, universities that are working on sort of fledgling quote unquote college sports. But I mean, we're the only country in the world that has this Olympic system, that's for sure. And it's certainly valuable, but it's not the only way to fund Olympic sports. And this idea of, well, we are not going to fund robust Olympic sports programs because we have to pay the players is potentially the reality of the current business model that they have, but it's not the only business model. There are other options, right? There has to be. So that is, the question of instead of changing your business model, you would rather spend millions of dollars in Congress trying to convince Congress to write new laws that would allow you to keep the business model you have that pretty much everyone has agreed is kind of unfair, at least to certain athletes who are generating billions of dollars in revenue every year and not seeing enough of it. So that's where we're at right now. It's a really interesting time.
We keep seeing different iterations of the same idea that the NCAA and now apparently the Power Four pushing back against student athletes becoming employees. What's the end game? They keep losing. Is this just it's worth so much money for them to kick this can as many years down the road as they can and collect as much money as they can? Is this let's keep buying time until hopefully, fingers crossed, the courts and the government kind of bail us out and change their mind and we get our way? Why keep bringing up the same? Because we've been talking about this. I cover recruiting. That's my main job. And so I see the student athlete side a lot. And this same argument has been made now for a decade, and the courts keep saying, no, you can't. You can't.
Right.
So what's the end game here? Why continue to bring it up so many different times, so many different ways, seemingly the same thing, the same argument?
Right. I mean, look, I wish I knew. I wish I understood it, because there are even schools that acknowledge that the system needs to change. Collective bargaining, at least for some sports, needs to be implemented. I think where we're at right now is there is this like vestige of amateurism that the NCAA and many of the member schools and many of the administrators have spent so many years fighting for, right? Then the NCAA a couple of years ago brings in this new leadership in Charlie Baker, and he's a former Republican governor of a Democratic state of Massachusetts. So he is used to wheeling and dealing and making compromises, right? So they bring him in to try to convince Congress to let them, keep on with this business model because, as you said, they keep losing in court. So Congress is really their only option, right? Not even an executive order has enough teeth to protect them from all of these lawsuits. So they're like, okay, this is the number one thing for us. It has to be Congress. So they task Charlie Baker with getting a federal law that the athletes aren't employees and like they have these protections. But even Charlie Baker agrees that the players should be paid more. And if you listen to his comments yesterday at the Night Commission at this event, he spoke pretty candidly about his frustrations about the finger pointing and the concept that the players deserved more than they were getting when he came in. So it's like, I'm not even sure how much Charlie Baker believes in amateurism. I think at this point, everyone's just dug their heels in and said, it's too hard to change our business model at a campus level and at a conference level. So let's just fight to keep it the way it is.
Well, and it just like the last thing that we saw from the Power Four is this ridiculous memo telling conferences that you will sign an agreement saying that our rules supersede state law, which good luck with that, and that you're not allowed to sue us. I mean, that's the most ludicrous thing. And that if you don't sign it, we'll kick you out. Good luck kicking Ohio State out of the Big Ten. Fox would like a word with you, right? Like
that is exactly what I said to my editors. I said, good luck kicking Tennessee out of the SEC. ESPN would like a word as well.
Yeah. And so it seems just, we're just going backwards, making no progress. So I know we're up against it, but do you think we have any sort of general time frame? Because the revenue sharing stuff was supposed to happen July 1st, and we were supposed to move ahead this year with payments and all that. But is that in jeopardy? Is there a reasonable timeline to where we can at least move forward with some form of revenue sharing and a new rule? Or are we in the wild, wild west for the foreseeable future? Where do we get some clarity? How far down the road?
So the House settlement, which is where the NCAA and everyone would agree to revenue sharing pretty much, right?
Yeah.
We could get a decision literally like any second now. Every night after 5 p.m., I sit and I wait and I wonder if I'm going to get a decision from the judge who's, on your Pacific time zone. I'm on the East Coast. So that's super fun. It has to come by the end of the month. Like, I cannot imagine the judge will take this long to approve or deny it. So that's like going to be our first set of clarity. And then if and when that settlement gets approved, the question then becomes, okay, will any of the rules that people have to abide by because of the settlement, like the revenue sharing cap and the clearinghouse about NIL not being pay for play, like, will those get challenged in court? And if so, what's going to happen? So I think that's kind of like what our summer is going to look like.
Well, it's going to keep you busy. It's going to make me put my head through a wall, but it's going to keep you busy because it sounds like you're going to have...
You and me both. I'm putting my head through a wall, but I'm bringing my laptop with me,
Well, we really appreciate taking a few minutes for us. You do a great job covering this. Again, find her stuff, frontofficesports.com, or you can find her on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. Amanda Cristovich, Front Office Sports. We really appreciate taking some time for us.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks for having me.
And this is my problem, right? She said it right there. Once the House settlement gets agreed to, which could happen, like she said, any day, the moment you tell a school that they have to do away with their NIL deals, that school is just going to be like, no, we're going to do what we want. And then you either have a fight between the school and the conference, or the conference battles the school and the school says, cool, I'm just going to sue you. You really think Oregon or Tennessee or anyone else is going to let the Power Four or the NCAA come in and say that 90% of your NIL deals are now invalid?
I get asked about this a lot, and I've had the CEO of my company, of our company, asked me to do stories on this, and I was like, "You don't want that. You did trust me. You don't. If you want me to do things on every little piece that gets passed, you also let me have to do an analysis piece that says this is going to get thrown out because of antitrust laws immediately, and we're back to square one." Until they go to a model that's similar to the NBA, Major League Baseball, and the NFL. We're going to keep doing this. And here's the other thing that I find really strange. You look at the revenue that's been made from the big schools. They're going to still have swimming and tennis and and wrestling. They can still afford it. As much as people say Oregon's spending a ton and Miami's spending a ton, they're making money. They made money last year.
But it's the smaller schools.
Yeah.
The smaller schools will be the one.
But that's what is happening now, that you have to start paying these athletes. Unfortunately, universities can't set up a model where they have athletes compete and make 100% of the money off them. You can't do that anymore.